We know that today is Rosh Chodesh, and in Birchos Chodesh, there's a couple of things that I noticed that are problematic. It says, we ask for Chaim Shalom, Shein B'hem Yerushalayim Yerushalayim, said at the end, but if we look before, it says, Chaim Shein B'hem Yerushalayim Yerushalayim, and then it says later on, Chaim Shein B'hem Avos Torah Yerushalayim. So they say, we ask for Yerushalayim twice. Chofetz Chaim answered that question, and he said, in between the two requests, there's another request for Osher V'Chavod. So now when you had Osher V'Chavod, you need another Yerushalayim. I mention that because it says Chaverim Kol Yisrael. We all say Chaverim Kol Yisrael v'Nomar. So I think there's different types of Chaverim. There's a Chaver, in the negative sense, we'll read soon, that you're not allowed to no sisnas achicha v'avavecha. You can't hate another guy. You have to be friendly with another guy. I don't look forward to seeing this guy. If I bump into him, okay, I'll say hello. Then there is Chaverim Kol Yisrael. I think this means, for example, it says in Pirkei Avos, Kadei L'Chol Chaver. Buy yourself a friend. What does it mean? Rav Taragin explained. Even if you're on the opposing team, he's still a Jewish guy. You're a Met fan. He's a Yankee fan, right? You're from Boston. He's from New York. It doesn't matter. Pay the price. Pay the price and get over that particularly. And then I think there's another reference to the Torah of Rocha the son of Belial. When they saw it, just to see him makes you happy. So I have to say, the last type of friendship I have with Rav Taragin, I don't know if he has with me, I've had the pleasure of going to his house and having his cheesecake at home, going to the Shalosh Shabbos, and you're invited if you come for this Shabbos, but really is the sense, together, the framework of Baruch Ha'osam Believa. So he's here today. I apologize, you emailed me, I didn't respond, and Rabbi Hirschman grabbed the email first and responded to talk about Rav Lichtenstein, who was a great fellow, who was the Rosh Hashiva of Har Etzion, of Yeshiva's Kush Etzion. He spoke about this, I think, in the past, and it was very inspiring. And he's here to tell us about who Rav Lichtenstein was, and maybe we can model ourselves after such a great person. Thank you, Rabbi Taragin. Thank you. That was all true.
Much smaller. So, I'm honored to be considered part of your circle of friendship, so thank you. Just going to get my water. Thank you. And thank you for welcoming me in Rosh Hashanah. But I want to thank you, not just for giving me the opportunity to speak with you, but because it's very important to me. This was someone that changed my life. I think about him a lot, almost every day. And this week in particular, I try to spend more time thinking about him and learn some of his Torah and relive some of those memories. So for me, this is a very meaningful week, and the opportunity to share with you is very helpful for me, so thank you. Let me take a step back and share with you my own personal story, because I can tell you who Rav Lichtenstein was, and you walk away inspired. It goes in one ear, out the other ear, then you move on. But why am I here, and how could this be an experience? It's not just inspiration, which I hope it is, but something a little bit more. I learned in Gush my first 2 years, from 1983 to 1985. I came back, and I attended Yeshiva University, and I was placed in Rabbi Soloveitchik's shir. What an exciting moment. I still remember my knees trembling walking into that shir. I heard so many fabled stories about the Rav shir, Rabbi Soloveitchik. And the Rav, unfortunately, was very, very ill. And he was running between doctors, and even when he came, it was hard for him to speak. It was almost impossible to understand him. And about 5 or 6 months after the shir started, he retired to Boston, and he passed away 7 years later in 1993. So January 1986, the music stopped. I was terribly traumatized by that. I've been waiting to go to the Rav shir, the Rav shir, the Rav shir. I can't remember Rabbi Soloveitchik. I heard so many stories. Is it better without the microphone? No. It works good, yeah. Either way. Okay, I'm a little bit of a cold. And at that point, I remember I made a commitment to myself. I said, I'm going to become a Talmud of Rabbi Soloveitchik, no matter what happens. How do you become a Talmud if someone stops giving shir? You didn't walk into the shir every day. Well, I think that's the difference between a Rebbe and a gadol. I'm a Rebbe. I've influenced Baruch Hashem a lot of Talmidim in my life. I hope they'll continue to live by whatever influence I've had. I don't expect that I'm going to influence their children or their Talmidim. I don't think their children are going to talk about me. I don't think their Talmidim are going to talk about me. I influence their lives. You walk into someone's life, you make an impact. A gadol is so broad and so deep and so impactful that it don't just influence the Talmidim. He influences, as we say during Kriyas HaTorah, Talmidei Talmideihem. That a gadol doesn't just have Talmidim, but Talmidim of his Talmidim still absorb what he gave those. That's how deep it is. That's how powerful it is. So I never had the chance to learn the Vaisal I don't know. I learned a couple of months. But I spent 32 years with Rav Taragin. I spent many years learning from Rav Shechter and other Rabbanim of Yeshiva University and other places that learned the Vaisal and I really see myself as a Talmud of the Rav, even though how many hours did I spend in front of him? I don't know. About half a year. I remember standing at the Rav's Levaya in 1993. I went to Boston. We took a flight up to Boston, all this Yeshiva University. The stewardess, you were the flight?
No, I came from New York. You?
I took a flight from New York. I was in New York then.
We drove.
I remember standing there as the hour passed by, and I was talking to Rabbi Soloveitchik. I was your last Talmud. I was in your last year. You never knew me, but I'll try my best to become your Talmud. And it was always in my mind that I'm a Talmud of the Rav. Spent no time in the Rav's year. So that's what I'd like you to start thinking about today. The fact that I missed the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer lived in 1800, like 200 years ago. It didn't bother me. Like I missed the Ramban. The Ramban is 800 years, 700 years ago in Spain. I read Hashem. I'll see him in Shemaim. I have a lot of things to talk about with him. I have a lot of things to talk about Chassam Sofer when I get to Shemaim, but it doesn't haunt me. But the fact that I missed Rabbi Soloveitchik by 5 years, that haunted me. But he's still my generation, right? This is our generation. Okay, I didn't sit in his shir, but I'm proximate to him. It's not like the Chassam Sofer, the Ramban, or the Akiva, and those people. This is our generation. So I'm here to tell you about my Rebbe, Rav Taragin. And you have the chance to, some of you are paying here, and some of the people in the community that learn with him. It's not just the people that learn with him, but the people that were impacted by his Torah secondhand and thirdhand. So you're not going to be Talmidim of Rav Taragin. You never met him, you're never going to meet him in your life. But you'll hear a few things, and hopefully it will move you ahead, move you along the road. And I'll try to make them as concrete as possible. Okay, so here's number one. Faith is not rational. Not that you can prove anything. You can't prove Hashem. You can't prove creation. You can't prove Har Sinai. You should try to personalize it. You should try to analyze it. You don't just close your eyes and say, I'm religious. Your intellect can make it more deep and authentic and durable. But at some point, you have to make a leap of faith. At some point, you have to buy in. At some point, you have to believe. You're not going to prove it all. You go down that road, you're going to be with a lot of hardship. So how do you believe? How do you believe in something? So let me tell you how I believe. When I started yeshiva, if you had asked me to describe Rav Taragin, there is no possible way I could wrap my imagination around someone of this stature. If you asked me to profile a 12th grader in Rambam, I've met a lot of 12th graders that are more or less, he's like this, like this, like this. Again, everyone's different, everyone's unique, but I can more or less give you a profile. If you had asked me to describe this person, I don't know, I've seen big Talmidei Chachamim, I've seen people who are really firm, I've seen people who daven well, but someone who had taken, as far as I saw, every aspect of what it is to be a human being. Okay, think about all the traits that it is to be human. Make a list of 30 traits. Not just how pious you are, how well you pray, how well you daven, how well you learn, but everything. Your dignity, your intellect, your compassion, your pity, your hard work, your diligence. Make a whole long list of all the traits you have. Think about the traits that you have, the qualities you have, not just the good parts, but the bad parts. And somehow try to perfect each and every one of those qualities, and not just perfect them, but try to use them to be a better Oved Hashem. I was just astounded. I was left speechless. I was sitting there, I could never imagine a person like this. Now, listen carefully. I once asked Rav Lichtenstein, can you please describe Rabbi Soloveitchik to me? And you know how Rav Lichtenstein described Rabbi Soloveitchik to me? In the same way that I saw Rav Lichtenstein. He said, I met this person, and there's no way I could ever imagine who this person was before I met him. And it was just so astounding, and so overwhelming, and so committed, and such a Torah scholar, and so bright, and so... And then Rav Lichtenstein once told us that Rabbi Soloveitchik told him about his Rebbe. Who was Rabbi Soloveitchik's Rebbe? Anyone know? Rav Chaim, his grandfather. And Rabbi Soloveitchik described Rav Chaim, his grandfather slash Rebbe, to Rav Lichtenstein in the same way that I saw Rav Lichtenstein and that Rav Lichtenstein saw the Rav. So now I'm standing in front of Rav Lichtenstein cubed, not squared but cubed. And you know what happens at that point? I'm willing to submit my own autonomy and my own decision making to someone else. I wanted to say these people are so great and so impressive and such integrity and such honesty and such faith and all the traits that I want to become, and I see them in ways that I can never achieve. So I'm not giving up who I am, I'm still my own person, but I'm willing to believe. I'm willing to believe because these are people that give me the confidence to believe. I'll find my own source of belief, and I'll find my own faith, and I'll work out my own relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But when I close my eyes at night, and I start having questions, and you know what, it's all right to have questions about religion. Religion isn't always having all the answers. Questions are healthy. Angry questions, subversive questions, you want to sabotage, that's harmful, but questions, you want to find, you want to look, when I close my eyes at night, I think about Rav Lichtenstein. And I think about what I belong to and a Masara that I'm part of. And faith is a lot about belonging, a lot about feeling that you belong to something, and you belong to great people. You know what I call that? Mr. Goldman, maybe you'll disagree with this phrase, but it's an interesting phrase. Everyone listen carefully. It may not sound like a phrase that makes sense, but it's an interesting phrase. I call it voluntary coercion. Voluntary coercion. What do I mean voluntary coercion? There are different things. Voluntary means you choose to do something. You choose to eat pizza, you choose to eat a burger. Coercion means someone coerces you to do something. What happens when you meet someone who's so impressive that you voluntarily want to be coerced? You voluntarily submit and suspend your own decision-making, not because you're giving up yourself, God forbid, not because you're abnegating yourself or canceling yourself. You're just saying, there's such a larger person here. I want to follow in that person's. I want to follow that person. I want that person to make me. Not to re-landscape me, not to lobotomize me. But follow. Someone asked me, I was giving this conversation yesterday, someone said, what was the moment that changed my life with Rav Lichtenstein? So I'll tell you the following story, okay? Listen carefully, all you 12th graders that are going next year. When I went to yeshiva, the absolute last thing on my mind was living in Israel. And the second last thing on my mind was being a Rebbe in Israel. What did I want out of my year in Israel? Have a good time. One and done, go back, be a doctor, maybe the Mets will win a World Series one day. That would make me happier. But Hart can attest to that. He knew me. No bigger dreams than that. Mets, Brooklyn, and I'd be happy. I met this person and he turned my head on a swivel. And then it was prom night, and Rav Lichtenstein was talking about Esther and Mordechai. Mordechai tells Esther about what's happening. She doesn't even know about the genocide because she's too busy with her princess and her mascara and her comforts. She gets all upset and she gets all unfurled. And then Mordechai says, Esther, do you know that we're about to be slated for execution? Lashmid, Lahar, Gulabin, Eskola, Yudin? And Esther says, well, I can't really speak to the king because there's protocol, there's bureaucracy, there's red tape, and I can't go. And he hasn't. And Mordechai says, are you kidding? We're dying and you're sitting there worrying about bureaucracy and whether the king has called you? Now you know how the Megillah ends. You all know. Mordechai says, if you're quiet, Hashem will find ways to save Am Yisrael, you can just fall off the face of the earth. But Rav Lichtenstein was talking. Remember, Rav Lichtenstein, everything was long. Shiur were 3 hours, and the Sichot were 2. He used to speak Friday night a minimum of an hour and a half. Minimum. I'd come home, we'd make Kiddush in the summer, 10:30 at night. My wife would wait, make Kiddush 10:30, my wife would say, what did Rav Lichtenstein speak about tonight? I said, he said Moshe was a good person. My wife would say, it took him an hour and a half to say that? Nothing about Rav Aaron was black and white. Everything was gray and subtle, because that's the way the world is. Learn not to answer questions in black and white, in simplicity, in one dimension. Is it good or is it bad? Well, it depends. So Moshe was a good person. What does it mean to be a good person? Where does good come from? What's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's definition of good? When is good too dangerous? What are the applications? If it was broad and panoramic and brilliant, everything at once, some people sometimes ask me why I don't quote Rav Lichtenstein. I quote Rav Lichtenstein all the time. Rav is unquotable. Because every time he would discuss, and this is a very, very abstract point, I hope I can convey it to you. Every time you talk about one subject, you wouldn't be talking about that subject. You'd be talking about the entire system of religion through the prism of that subject. So when you talk about humanism, he wasn't talking about humanism, he was talking about all of Avodas Hashem and what is humanistic. And when he's talking about good and evil, it was everything. He was building a building block by block by block. You see, if I would recognize some of this, where it's not telescopic or periscopic, it's broad and systemic. So Rav Lichtenstein was speaking for 2 hours before the Megillah Esther. You know how excited everyone is. And Rav Aaron was describing Mordechai's challenge of Esther. And Rav Aaron made believe he was Mordechai. And he was screaming. Rav Aaron was a very, very soft-spoken person. He never raised his voice, never got angry. I never heard him scream. There were only 3 times he screamed. Once, when his old and senile father was with him in yeshiva, and he was walking him up the stairs, and he had to let him know how many stairs there were. It was so uncanny because Rav Aaron was so genteel and such a balamidos. You see, there are some halachos that you can't learn from a Shulchan Aruch. I don't care how long you know the Shulchan Aruch, it won't help you. And you know the classic one, Kibbut Avayim. You can know Hilchos Kibbut Avayim backwards and forwards and inside out. It will not help you because the gap between the abstract concept of Kibbut Avayim and the challenge of Kibbut Avayim is a mile wide. And the only way that you can fulfill Kibbut Avayim the right way is if you see it. If you see your father, you see your mother, you see people doing it, you're involved in it. Otherwise, good luck. It's very, very high in Kibbut Avayim. It's too many emotions, it's too complicated. So we saw Rav Aaron's Kibbut Avayim. He'd be sitting there talking in front of his measure, 500 people Yom Kippur night, and his father was sitting right next to him, and his father was a little bit senile and was starting to drift and shout out in the middle. Rav Aaron stopped. He wasn't holding a microphone. Sat down next to his father, caressed his father, talked to him for 5 minutes until he came back and started the exact words he stopped. And for those 5 minutes, you could hear a pin drop. We knew we were seeing godliness. We knew we were seeing something. We could never. I went to write it down. I was Yom Kippur. I know I was seeing something that I never forget. And the second time that Rav Lichtenstein shouted, let me give you a little bit of background, okay? When you're young, the easiest thing to do is to stereotype yourself and to label yourself. I'm this, I'm not that. I'm that, and I'm not this. But you're all the time in political. I'm left, and therefore I believe in these values. Or I'm right, therefore I believe in these values. And you know what? It's lazy, and it's an invitation to mediocrity. Don't define yourself by labels. Don't say I'm this and not that. Because you're holding yourself back from being broader and larger and deeper. Very often people say, so they ask me, I'm speaking this weekend in West Hempstead. Ever from West Hempstead? I see Shabbos. So they ask me, how should they introduce me? Religious Zionist Jew, modern Orthodox Jew? I say, are you kidding? I'm an ultra-Orthodox Jew. What do you mean? I say, every single person in this world has a responsibility to be ultra-Orthodox. Wait, you want to be semi-Orthodox, half-Orthodox? I believe that this derech that I've seen is the best way for me to be an Oved Hashem, because I saw it lived in the most supreme fashion. I'm not saying other ways aren't appropriate. If you feel that being a Haredi is better orthodoxy than this approach, go become one, and I'll drive you. And you have responsibility to become. This is an ultra-Orthodox institution. And if you don't think it is, you should go somewhere else. But it is. Because if you follow this route here, you will become as best an Oved Hashem as you can be. You have the Masorah, and you're obeying that way. So don't label yourself. Sometimes we label ourselves on this and on that until you see great people who give you the confidence to hybridize, give you the confidence to merge. So for example, you know sometimes people divide the world. There are 2 types of Jews. There are the thinking Jews, who are soft-spoken, who read Rabbi Sachs, who read Gemara. There are the Rambam Jews, and there are the cerebral Jews. And then there are those Jews down in Far Rockaway, the mikveh dippers, and the Tehillim shouters, and the gartel wearers. And we're not like them. We're the quiet Jews. We're the thinking Jews. We're not the shouting Jews. Well, let me share with you how Rav Lichtenstein's Birchas Atara sounded. You ready? It's going to be a little shrill, but that's how it was. I'm not going to say the whole thing. Baruch Hu, screaming at the top of his lungs. Yesh, you were his Yeshua, his Tehillim, his Dir Shuas Hashem B'hi Matzah and Tanis. And he taught us not to settle for one and not the other. You can be both. I mean, Rav walked into a room, the world stood still. You're looking at the smartest person you have ever met, not just in the Jewish world. He was in Harvard, and they say he'd written the best thesis on Milton that ever. Douglas Bush was his mentor, affairs Milton professor. The world stood still. You were looking at a fellow, you were standing in front of someone that came from another century, that landed from another planet. That's how noble, that's how kind, that's how pious, that's how committed. You just stood and you were frozen. And then when you saw him, daven, say Baruch Hu Hashem, say Heshmer Abba. So here's one challenge. I'll give you 3 or 4 challenges today. When's the last time you held back from showing your frumkeit and expressing it because you were a little embarrassed, because you don't want to be seen as a screamer or a shouter? Now, don't get me wrong. Don't ever show your frumkeit just to be exhibitionist and to be ostentatious and to celebrate your own ego and to gain attention. God forbid, you walk down that road, you're walking through a very, very dark hole, and you may feel frum, you are not, and you'll never recover your authentic self, because you'll always be playing to the crowd. So be careful. When's the last time you were just a little embarrassed to daven well because, people are looking at me, I don't want to express my Yiddishkeit, or I don't want to show people that I'm daven benching with kavanah, or you never, not because you want to show, but you hold back because you're afraid that your frumkeit will be, they call it in Israel dasi. You can't be a dasi. So I tell my kids all the time, be a dasi. It's all right to be a dasi. It's good to be dasi. Dasi is, instead of dati, is like a Yiddish application of it. It's all right to be a dasi. It's all right to daven. It's all right to read sentences out. So that was the second time Rav Lichtenstein screamed. The third time that he would raise his voice, not just when he was helping his father, and not just when he was saying, Birchas Atara Yehi Shmei Rabba Tehillim, was when he had a moral statement to make. Oh my goodness. It was as if he was possessed by a demon. I can't explain it any other way. He was very quiet and soft-spoken. It would be like a storm brewing. I call it, another good phrase, moral velocity. He just felt, he couldn't get in the way. He just felt such strong moral commitment and commitment to principles. We once asked Rav Lichtenstein how to change our midos, how to face challenges in life. Here's the second challenge, okay? Here's the second challenge, not just to show your frumkeit. He said that when you are facing moral challenges, don't think in theory what's right and what's wrong. Because we all know what's right and what's wrong, and when push comes to shove, in the heat of the moment, we lie to ourselves, we false narrative ourselves, we make excuses for ourselves, we see things the way they are just to let ourselves off the hook, just to soothe our conscience. Rav Aaron said that you should find someone who you respect and use that person as your moral example and ask yourself what he would do in that situation. Make it real. Who did that? Who remembers in Tanakh? Who did Chazal tell us? Who said that? Yeah, say, what does he do?
He saw like his image of his father.
Very good. What's your name? Shlomo, very good. He sees his father's image, Shlomo. Excellent. And I tried that. I really, of course, when he said this, Rav Aaron, we all said, of course, you're going to be our guy. Very interesting story. We asked Rav Aaron Lichtenstein who his moral example was. And we all thought it would be the Rav. And you know what he said? You'll like this. He said that his moral example was Rav Aaron Soloveitchik. And you could probably speak about him more than I can about his moral fortitude. You would.
We have a similar situation of a moral, feeling that stand back for around salvation to the community, and he spoke at the Visible Lawrence University between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and people came over and they were saying that his stroke is very crippled, it's hard for him to stand up, so people went to shake his hand and wish him a good job, and one guy came and kissed his hand. Rav Aaron Salvation was blew up. No, 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 I'm just a person. And I told him on the way home, because I was driving him, the person that came to you didn't understand his body. And I told the guy, you shook the hand and kissed the hand of a Pastor Reggie. He's Ashkenazi from Lithuania. They don't go for that stuff. So each side understood the other side. So that was really one small example. So I want you to continue, please.
Yeah, well, I was in his share towards the end of his life. It was just, again, a moral hurricane. He would start, he would learn B'Ksuas, he would read, Besseland, Besseland, this is the Mavi. Those they formed rabbis, and then 2 hours ago, then the next day, Shakti, Chachamim, Takonis, B'nais Yisrael, Reagan is in 2 hours in Reagan. It was just, he felt he couldn't hold himself back. I think of Moshe Rabbeinu, what he says to the daughters of Yisrael, it's not the thing you should be doing, you're a criminal, you're a refugee, he was intervening in the bar fight. So here's my second challenge, okay? Do you have someone like that in your life? Do you have a father or a mother or a grandparent or a rebbe, obviously, who you trust so well, so much? Someone asked me a couple days ago in yeshiva, they were leaving yeshiva, what should I look for in Rebbeim when I leave yeshiva? I said, look for the following traits: humility, authenticity, humanity, and someone who you feel empowers you rather than deflates you. Because sometimes Rebbeim, they manipulate you, they coerce you, they force you, and they just feel like less of a person. Job of Rebbe is to make you feel more of a person, make you feel more about yourself, and you can accomplish more, not accomplish less, because you feel that they're telling you what to do or manipulating you. Do you have someone like that in your life? Do you have a role model who you trust so much and you feel is so authentic and so committed and so principled that you can say, when I talk about moral challenges, guys, I don't mean you're being tempted by your master's wife, Shlomo. You know, if the master doesn't have a wife, I don't mean that. What do I mean? When's the next time you feel angry, petty, jealous, selfish, lazy, cowardly? These are the margins right now that you're standing at between identity. Right now, you're not facing large, dramatic questions. These are the questions. You don't want to go to davening. You don't want to learn. You feel lazy. You feel tired. You feel cowardly. You feel petty. You feel jealous. You feel angry. I'll tell you very frankly, when I was your age and a little bit older, I had an anger issue. I remember when I was in my 20s, I used to get angry. And I worked very, very, very hard to try to deal with my anger issue. And the way I dealt with it is exactly how Rav told me. I thought of Rav, and every time he wouldn't react this way. He wouldn't say terrible things. He wouldn't go, screaming and shouting. And Baruch Hashem, I've reached a point. I don't feel like I can't remember the last time I felt anger. I feel frustration, I feel disappointment, I feel whatever. I don't feel in anger, I feel in rage. That's how you can change your traits. Try to find people in your life that you can model yourself after and say, how would that person behave if they were petty or jealous? And they won't be jealous if they came to that situation. So getting back to that story, remember, Aaron was screaming for a night because Esther was refusing to save Am Yisrael. And Aaron was playing the role of Mordechai. He was shouting because he was in a moral storm, not even a rage. He wasn't angry, it was just moral compulsion and moral passion. And he started screaming the following 5 words. There are 500 boys in the base medrash. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein was screaming, "Ich lach, oh, lo ich. You know what that means in English? Excellent. Mordechai was challenging Esther. Do you care? Do you not care? He said it 10 times. And you could hear a pin drop. And he was looking right at me, or so I thought. And after the 8th time, I said, Rebbe, enough. I care. Just stop screaming at me. Not because he was screaming with anger. It just felt, I felt, this is my moment of voluntary coercion. I want to change my life. I don't want to just go back, root for the Mets, eat some good food, and move on. I want to make a difference. And that's what changed my life. Because you knew you were standing in the presence of greatness. You knew you were standing in the presence of... You see, sometimes when rabbis or people speak to you, you think like, well, maybe they're just pontificating and preaching to us, but they don't really. What happens when you know that person is living not just the standards he's expecting of you, but even beyond? Like he would push us not to sleep that much. We knew he slept maybe 3-4 hours a night, maybe. He would fall asleep when you were talking to him. That's how tired he was. He would push us not to cave into our appetite. Shir would always end, always, a half an hour after it was supposed to end. It was supposed to end at 1, and it would end at 1:30. And he was training us not to let hunger get in the way of anything. And we would miss lunch on a daily basis. And this was when Israel in general was very poor, and Gush Etzion was in the middle of nowhere. So there was no restaurants, zero, nothing. We'd eat bread and vegetables for a couple days, maybe a couple of rice was left over. But we knew that he did the same. And that's called being driven, I said before, being driven. I'll tell you a cute story, but every time I want to be weak, I don't even take credit for it. Every time I feel like I'm weak or something, I'm hungry, but I don't let hunger get in the way, or I'm tired, and I don't let fatigue get in the way, I feel like he's looking at me. And I have to behave better because I'd be embarrassed to face him. And that's called being driven. Part of a moral example is not just when you have a moral question and you ask what that person would do, but you feel someone's presence. Do you feel someone's presence looking at you? Part of being an Oved Hashem is feeling Hashem's presence looking at you. Well, it's hard to feel Hashem's presence, but hopefully we can feel it at some point in your life. But if you have people that you're so close with, you feel their presence. So let me tell you a cute story. One of Rav Taragin most important trait is probably the gateway trait to all the traits. If you're asking, what is the one trait that's the most important trait, it's obvious. And Chazal talk about it, and Shlomo talks about it, Egev Anava Yiras Hashem. It all starts with humility. If you're a humble person, a lot of good will happen. If you're an arrogant person, you'll be adrift. It all starts with humility. Rav Taragin was supremely humble. I remember we used to call our house when we lived in America. There was one phone in the house. And my wife would pick up the phone, hi, it's Aaron. And my wife would talk to Aaron for about half an hour, then say, "Can I speak to your husband?" And my wife would say, "What's your last name?" And he would say, "Lichtenstein." And she would faint on the floor, "Quickly, Rav Aaron's on the phone." But there are books of those stories. Two kids sitting in the front of the Kush Beis Medrash. One kid asks his friend, "Aaron, what time is it?" So Rav Aaron turns around, "It's 5:50. Cute story, you guys are like this one. In our day in yeshiva, there was one phone in the entire yeshiva. One phone for all the boys, and it was only incoming because the yeshiva couldn't pay for outgoing. So there was only one phone, incoming phones only. So the minute was that the phone rang, you picked it up, and then you went to find the person and call him. And if he wasn't there, you gave him a message. So at one point the phone rings, and Rav Aaron picks up the phone because he's iron. Picks the phone, hello. Right? Person says, banging up a name, is David there? Or is David's girlfriend calling? So now the story's getting a little saucy. So David's girlfriend says, "Can you please call David from the Beis Medrash?" So Rav Aaron goes up to the Beis Medrash, looks here, is David here? Is David here? No, David isn't here. So he goes down and reports to the girlfriend, David's not here. So she says, "Okay, can you give a message?" "Sure." He says, "Tell David I'll meet him tomorrow night for a movie and then send him a bite to eat." So Rav Taragin says, "Yeah, there's night Seder in yeshiva. You can't come to a movie at 8:30. So the girl says, "Yeah, but everyone knows it's Gush and you can do whatever you want anyway." Right, it gets better. So I said, "Okay." And then she says, "Can I leave one more message?" She says, "Sure." She says, in these words to the Rosh Yeshiva, the Gadol HaDor, she says, "And tell David I love him." So the last report is that David was found on some mountaintop in Tibet, mumbling under the stars, asking himself why she continue living. But Rav Aaron didn't care. He was a normal person, regular, humble pie. So part of his humility is he refused to allow us to serve him. It was crazy. He would walk up. Let me show you. I put the mic down. Yeah, these two big boxes of Sfar. A big box of Rambam and a big box of Shas, plus all of Rishonim. And he'd be running through the stairs at the age of 70 like Superman, running up 3 flights of stairs. That's how much energy he put forth in Talmud Torah. He'd running, passing, they're carrying a little red body, you see him swishing by. And until the end of his life, it was more like a running self-picture. And of course, he had ambulatory issues. So what happened was he never let us take his farm after Shir. So at one point, I remember in Shir, we were having a wrestling match. Like I ran up and he grabbed the box. I wanted to take it, but he wouldn't let us. He never let anyone serve him. Remember, the first time I came to America, and I came back to the yeshiva, and and I wanted to get a receipt for the cab, and I wanted reimbursement for the cab. So I gave every yeshiva has a bean counter to make sure that I gave the bean counter guy in yeshiva my receipt for the $30 of the cab. And he looked at me and says, really, why do you need to take a cab? I said, I have to get from JFK to where I'm staying. He said, oh, it's funny, Rav Aaron's been traveling for all these years, he never once took a cab. So I asked Rav Aaron, how do you get to the airport? And from the airport, he said, oh, I take the subway. So we get on the subway with his suitcases from JFK, but there are gas, car, it would be, he wanted to let the yeshiva buy him a car. He wanted me to wait out there. Remember, he'd be waiting out in the middle of the intersection at Gush Etzion. This is before Gush was a big place. It was just this desert in the middle of nowhere, freezing cold and night. The buses back home. So everybody said, listen, I can't let my Rosh Yeshiva stand out there. So I got into my car at 5:30. He was right by the bus stop. I said, Rebbe, can I take you to Yerushalayim? So he said, are you going anyway? I said, no. He said, I'm not taking a ride. You won't let me. So the next day I got into my car, 5:30, drove by. Rebbe, can take you to Yerushalayim. Are you going anyway? Yes, I have a buddy. She lived in Baltimore. I'm going to visit my buddy. Next day, you going anyway? Yeah, a Bobby from Pittsburgh. You'd be surprised how many Bobbies I discovered. And then I went to the office and I blew a gun. I said, how can you let this man stand out there in the middle of a freezing cold, dark, Rosh Hashanah intersection? Haven't you told me? He said, don't you think we tried? Then I asked the secretary, but why to him? And she said, don't you think we've tried? So we're grabbing the star in front of him. And at some point, one of the Talmidim, it wasn't me, I went to the chutzpah, said, Rebbe, don't you know that you're depriving us of the mitzvah of Shimush Talmidei Chachamim by not letting us serve you? Because there's a mitzvah to serve Talmidei Chachamim, to help them. That's how you grow as a person. And Rav Aaron looked at us and said something, I'll never forget this statement, because he's so honest and penetrating. He says, I know that I'm depriving you of this mitzvah. I know, but I can't. I know that this is something that I should be doing, but I can't give away my constitution, my personality. I couldn't do it. So what happened was, let's just say, those of you who have Israeli cousins, you know they're not always the most considerate. So if you invite one of your rebbes to be Masaba Kedusha to come to your wedding, the nice thing to do is to ask them if they need a ride. Israeli boys don't always do that. So trust me. So Rav Aaron would get an invitation to a wedding up north. No one would ask him if he needs a ride. And he would take 5 buses to get to the wedding. A bus from Gush to Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv Haifa, Haifa Pardes Chana to a local bus till they got to the wedding. So we all knew that he needed a ride back because he didn't have a car. So when we got to our wedding, we'd make a beeline for Rav Aaron and say, can I take you home? And that would give us an hour and a half with Rav Aaron in the car. And then we'd get to the car, and of course my wife would offer the Rosh Yeshiva to sit down. She'd sit in the back. Rav Aaron said, nope. He refused to get into the car. He said, who am I to separate between a husband and his wife on a night they could be together? So there it was, me in the driver's seat, my wife next to him, and Rav Aaron in the back seat. And to this day, I can't get into a car. It's funny, people ask me to sit in the front. I'm a tall person. If the wife is there, I simply, why Rav Aaron's looking at me? Rav Aaron did it, why should I? Tolas Loish, nothing compared to him. So it's the least I can do is follow his standards. That's called leading a driven life, being driven. Feeling you have someone that compels you. Don't be tired, within reason. Obviously, you're a tired person. Don't let hunger get in the way. Learn. Keep a mitzvah. You feel like you have to rise to an occasion because you met someone that coerced you and that represented such a standard. Let me end with my final challenge. We talked about challenging yourself to show your firm, to make brachos loud, to bench properly, to whatever, putting your tefillin with seriousness, to just be quiet during prayer. Things that sometimes you walk back from because you're a little embarrassed to show how firm you are, and maybe it's time to flip the script a little, not worry about it. We talked about finding moral role models. Here's another one, okay? About 5 years before Rav Aaron passed away, he was interviewed by a great Rosh Yeshiva in Israel. I don't know if he's ever been here, but he's very, very underappreciated, by Rav Chaim Sabato. Did you ever come to visit? So Rav Chaim had an interview with Rav Aaron, all sorts of questions. If you're interested, there's a book called Seeking His Presence. If anyone wants to read Rav Aaron, I recommend it, because Rav Aaron's writing is so dense and complicated, but this is interviews. So Rav Chaim Sabato asked Rav Lichtenstein, what do you want written on your kever? You know what Rav Aaron said? I mean, if you ask me to write Rav Aaron's kever, I'd go to Gilgal, take all the stones that they put there, write your own notes, the entire Torah. I mean, I could write 12 novels about this man. But you know what Rav Aaron said? I want 2 words on my kever. What? Well, aside from that, like, phrases, I mean, that's just the name. So he said, I want 2 words. You listening? And it's eerie, because I go to the kever and I see, and Sunday everyone's going to the kever, and you see it, oh my goodness, I remember that story. You know the 2 words, normally kevers are very poetic and long. The 2 words in his kever? Oved Hashem. Not even Eved Hashem, because that would imply accomplishing that status. Just, I want to be an Oved Hashem in the process. Now, why am I telling this to you? Okay, everyone listen carefully, because this is the 3rd challenge. You see, you're still the generation of the Holocaust. We just had Yom HaShoah. What does it mean? You didn't go through the Holocaust, but you know people who did. Baruch Hashem, in this high school, you're politically active and trying to oppose, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's Holocaust criminals who have to be ferreted out. This is one of the legacies of this Baruch Hashem, this Masifta. But even if you're not, right? We're talking about a generation. I don't mean iPhone generation, which is 5 years. A generation is 70 years, 80 years. We're the generation of the Holocaust. In 100 years, your grandchildren are not going to be the generation of the Holocaust. They'll just read about it in books. We visited Poland, we've met survivors, we've heard stories. So you're the Holocaust generation. After the Holocaust, Hashem was very, very frightening to people, obviously, because everyone saw death and destruction. You just had Pesach, okay? I'm not going to go through the entire crowd. But how many people were at your Seder? I imagine in most cases it's 10, 15, or north. I'm sure Rabbi Friedman and Bihar can speak even more pointedly. At my Seder, there were 5 people: my puppy, my Zaidi, my father, my mother, and me. It was a very sad Seder, because there were no aunts and no uncles and no cousins, and everyone was sad because they were thinking about what had happened. So Hashem was very scary. And religion was very scary. So something happened over the last 70 years, and I want you to listen carefully because I'm speaking about it in an adult way. We had to make religion more user-friendly. How do we make religion more user-friendly? So first of all, we have to about it more cool and charismatic and warm and fuzzy and Torah and Dougies and Torah and pizza and Torah and fun and Torah and... My Rabbanim weren't warm and fuzzy. When I was in high school, I didn't know the Gemara got slapped across the face. You get slapped across the face today, end up in jail. So now today we have warm and friendly Rebbe. And Baruch Hashem, it's a better world, don't get me wrong. But something else happens, and now listen carefully. When people talk to you, me, other people, you're a babe, people talk to you, why are they from? You know what your answer is? Because it gives me, you can fill in the blanks, purpose, meaning, dignity, nobility, happiness, satisfaction, family, community, nation, national identity. So we are defining Frumkeit by what it does for us. In a good way, not in a hedonistic way or selfish way. Guys, there's another part of being from, you know what it is? It's called being an Eved Hashem. And not because it gives you anything. Because an Eved doesn't get anything. An Eved just is an Eved Hashem. Now, let's take a minute. So I just want to finish this idea. Those are very hard ideas to think about. Don't get me wrong, I'm not preaching to you. I also have a hard time. What does it mean to be an Eved? I don't even know what that means. Let me translate it to you in different terms. Here's a question. When's the last time you did something in religion that was hard? Hard either in the immediate sense for a few seconds, or even more hard in the enduring sense for a while. When's the last time you stepped out of your comfort zone and you pushed yourself to do something that didn't give you meaning, purpose, happiness, fulfillment, whatever it is?
Because you are an Eved Hashem. And Ana Avda L'Kudsha Baruch Hu. And an Eved doesn't ask himself what I'm getting, he asks himself how I'm getting. I don't have the answer to that question, because we're so far from that world, we're looking from a foreign world. So I'm changing the word Eved into heart. But I know I saw an Eved Hashem. And I know that any time I lose my grounding and I start to think about myself too much, I feel like I'm being pulled back. It's not about you. You're an Eved Hashem. And it's about something a little larger than yourself. So that's the third challenge. Challenge number 1, show your front guy. Challenge number 2, find moral role models you can use as a yardstick when you face challenges and who you feel, like Shlomo, you can have them looking at you during the day and making you be better and a better version of yourself because you saw it in them. And now you're starting from high school, some of you are in high school. If you're aware and you're looking for these people, you'll find them. They don't all have to be Rebbe. Just be great teachers. There are great teachers here, great people. They don't all have to be fun people. They're just good people who live life the right way. The third challenge is the next time you're a little tired, you're a little lazy, you're a little hungry, you don't want to learn, you don't want to do something, it's hard. Say, well, religion isn't meant to be easy. It's not meant to be fun. It's not only meant to be meaningful. I would simply else say, I'm going to serve my Christian life. Well, one day I'll know what Eved is. I'm still looking for that term. It's still something I'm struggling with. But I try to be an Eved in practice, even if it's this concept that's still hard to know. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this verse, and hopefully it's part of